Are you ready to enlarge your territory? Empire Transport is ready, willing, and able to cover all your transportation needs, both long haul and local. We service South Carolina, throughout the southeastern United States, and across the country. Sound good? In addition to freight hauling, Empire Transport also offers a 24/7 taxi service in South Carolina and the greater Charlotte area, and a mobile mechanic service where we come to you. Empire Transport, your go-to for freight hauls, taxi service, and mobile mechanic work. Learn more at empiretransport.co. Come and enlarge your territory with us. Welcome to Kingdom Now, the podcast featuring faith with an edge, as we celebrate the kingdom of God within you. I'm your host, Dr. Leanne Marino, apostle, author, and theologian, and founder of Spitfire Apostolic Ministries and all the works that go along with it. I'm excited to share this program with you as we explore the ins and outs of counterculture Christianity present as you live out the kingdom of God in your everyday life. Want to learn more? Visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. And now, our program, which features a variety of formats here just for you. Interviews, teaching and preaching proclaimed everywhere from my North Carolina studio to Sanctuary and beyond, and powerful insights here for now as we turn the world upside down everywhere we go. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, happy whatever time of day it is wherever you are. And to our listeners in Malta, we say bonjour. We hope that whatever time of day it is when you are listening, that you are having a good one. And I welcome you to this edition of the Kingdom Now podcast. And I am your host, Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino, here as the Spitfire, serving as the voice of counterculture Christianity, where we feature the theme of faith with an edge. And if you'd like to learn more about the world of counterculture Christianity, feel free to visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. I recently had a couple of conversations with people that related to the issue of hypocrisy, or more aptly put, what I classify as the hypocrisy argument. And they got me to thinking about the argument. In essence, my response to the argument hasn't changed much from earlier times. If anything, I'm probably more adamant in my position on it than I used to be. And that's probably surprising to many because I openly admit to more or less relaxing about a lot of things over the years. But when it comes to this particular issue and the argument that surrounds it, I might be firmer than I once was. To clarify, the hypocrisy argument is, as I'm summarizing here, is as often stated. I don't do something, specifically go to church, participate in organized religion, or believe in God, because church people, religious organizations, preachers, etc. are hypocritical. Yes, there are variations on this statement. Yes, there are different ways it's sometimes expressed. But at the basis of the argument is hypocrisy. That someone or an entire group is hypocritical based on your own personal standards of such. And in that realm, you're not going to believe in certain things because of that foundational hypocrisy. Most of the time, people don't have very good answers for this argument. In fact, I'd venture most people back off when that's someone's answer. And the reason why they back off is because they feel guilty. The statement sparks a sense of guilt in someone, thinking maybe of all the times they didn't quite measure up to the standards of their faith, and the response is often in compassion. It's one by which, you know what, yeah, we haven't all measured up, so maybe we shouldn't have this conversation anymore. The other extreme are people who respond with a lot of defensive words and talk way too much, and start throwing around excuses, which I also don't think is a good or constructive way to approach these matters either. Excuses aren't of any value, but neither is avoiding the conversation. So how do we answer the hypocrisy argument? Well, for that, let's first go to Matthew 7 for some information. So we're going to start in verse 1 of chapter 7, and I'm reading from the New International Version, the NIV, for anybody who's interested to follow along. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is sacred, do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Verse 7. Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be open. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Verse 13, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus by their fruit you will recognize them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Now, I read much further past the common passages that we read when we have these conversations about hypocrisy. And the reason I did that is because there's a few different examples of hypocrisy or of addressing issues of hypocrisy in the passage that we often skip over. So let's understand in the Bible, the term hypocrite was from a Greek word that referred to an actor working under an assumed character, i.e., it was an actor in character. It also referred secondarily to someone who was a dissembler or pretender. I think the definition is very important in understanding the meaning of the word and the accusation at hand, and we can't avoid it. So a hypocrite is someone who is knowingly playing along with a role in that they know they are doing something dishonest. So having said that, what is hypocrisy not? It is not the following things. Changing one's mind or belief system about something. And this happens to all of us from time to time. Now, it's hypocritical if we lie about this fact, but there's nothing wrong with deciding that you don't agree with something anymore and moving towards something else. Sometimes we grow in our understanding of things, we change our perspectives, and that doesn't make anybody a hypocrite. Upholding certain beliefs or moral principles. Everyone is entitled to believe as they do and about what they do. And just because someone believes something doesn't mean they are a hypocrite. That isn't fair. If you disagree with something, you disagree with it, but that doesn't make someone a hypocrite. So just because somebody has certain beliefs or principles does not make them a hypocrite. It might mean they don't understand their belief system the same way that you might, or it might mean that they don't see things exactly the same way, but that does not make them a hypocrite. Believing in something, such as God, a higher power, or religious system by itself does not make someone a hypocrite. Try again. Or having a strong opinion, because we can all have opinions. Hypocrisy is a deliberate action. It's not an opinion, and it's something that is very much done on purpose. Based on the definition and what I've known of people and the level of deception that we can all engage in at different points in our lives, I'd argue everyone is a hypocrite at some point in their lives. We've all deliberately played a part, knowing it wasn't what we should do and knowing that it was wrong, and honestly, we did it anyway. So I'd say hypocrisy is part of the universal human condition. Maybe you reach a point where you're not doing it anymore, but at some point in time you did. There was a disconnect between what you were doing and what you knew you should have been doing. Thus, if it's a universal human condition, and why Jesus mentioned it to begin with, it's something we experience the results of as much as we do ourselves. Because even those who refuse and say they aren't hypocrites, there's some part somewhere in your life that doesn't perfectly align. People tell me that they like me, especially those who are outside of the church, because I present a reasoned, systematic argument and I live what I believe. And yes, they're right. I do my very best to live what I believe, but I'm sure there's some part of myself that's not dealing with something yet that will at some point in time have to be confronted, thus becoming more authentic. We aren't perfect. Nobody is. And expecting people to live up to a standard even you aren't living up to is unreasonable. Because like the Bible says, if we say we don't sin, we deceive ourselves. And if you're honest with yourself, you're going to get there one day yourself. We find hypocrisy everywhere in our lives. There isn't a special bat signal for hypocrites to gather at church because they are found everywhere. There are hypocrites on your job, at school, at restaurants, at Walmart, at grocery stores, at department stores, on the internet, on television, on social media. People elect hypocrites to office, and maybe they don't see it that way, but that doesn't change the fact that that's exactly what those people are. We have hypocritical family members, friends, and associates on every level. Hypocrisy is everywhere. And whether we want to admit it or not, we know how to both entertain and proliferate it as needed. Kissing up to our boss, doing something we know we shouldn't do, but if we just let it slide, it's somehow profitable to us. That's all hypocrisy. Always giving a family member their way because it's easier than trying to confront their behavior and playing the part of the dutiful relative. That's hypocrisy. Putting on a good front when our lives are in crisis or a total mess behind the scenes. That's hypocrisy. So yeah, we like to talk about it in terms of churches and preachers, but that's certainly not where hypocrisy begins or ends. And if we are honest with ourselves, it hits a lot closer to home than an awful lot of us are really comfortable admitting. Should we feel guilty about hypocrisy? I think like anything else, we shouldn't feel good if we know we aren't doing the right thing. We have guilt for a reason. Now, guilt can be maligned and can be used so we feel guilty when we didn't do anything wrong. And that's definitely a thing, and that's definitely something that should be addressed. And I definitely think that there are a lot of people that could benefit from making that distinction and learning how to understand or perceive their own issues with guilt in that vein. We can feel guilty when we don't do anything wrong. But at the same time, there are an awful lot of people who are just writing off the idea of guilt as having any practical value. And anytime they feel guilty or convicted or something of that nature, they don't really deal with why they're feeling that way and that maybe it's justified sometimes. So it's not an either or thing. We like the idea of not feeling any guilt, but we do need to find a middle ground. If we're really not being honest about who we are and what we stand for, we should not feel good about doing that. It should provoke guilt in us. I'm going to say I don't feel we should feel guilty about the things other people do. So we shouldn't be in a position where we're feeling guilty because somebody else at some point in time did something and now we feel bad about it. Millions of billions of people existed before me throughout history, and I can't answer for all of them what they did or didn't do, or how well they did or didn't live their faith. I can answer for me. I can do what I know to be right, but I should not be expected to answer for what someone did 478 years ago or what someone is doing somewhere right now. We might share a theological presupposition, but people don't always follow presuppositions, and if you learn anything from the Old Testament, it's that laws and rules don't make people moral. They had all those rules. They had over 600 of them in total, and then they kind of further break them down so they had even more than that. There was literally something for every single aspect of everybody's life, and it still didn't make them moral. It still didn't make them do the right thing. So let's look a little bit more in depth at this particular argument, and let's kind of take it apart. Let's deconstruct it. We are overwhelmingly inconsistent in hypocrisy arguments, which I think is ironic because basically hypocrisy is an inconsistency issue, and we're inconsistent with the arguments of hypocrisy that are made. If you're going to use that as an argument against something, then it should be against everything, but it's often not. An example I give of the moral dilemma of hypocrisy is found in the show Dr. Finlay, which was a staple of BBC television in the early to mid-90s, and it's now considered a classic. There was an episode where a married woman was pregnant with a baby that wasn't her husband's. And that right there sets a whole hour of judgment against the woman. I mean, I bet that you all probably had certain thoughts and feelings about what I just said based on that information alone. But if we listen to the rest of the plot, it turned out that the woman's husband wouldn't touch her sexually. He had a fetish with the idea of her as being pure, holding her to an abstract standard in the image of his mother. And in that pursuit, she turned to someone else because there was no way that she could live up to the image that her husband had for her. Now, I hear that situation and I upfront say that it was complicated. It was a human mess predicated by human predicament. But if we're going to talk hypocrisy, the woman was the one who broke her marriage vows. So technically, she was the one who pledged to do something and lived a life that she wasn't living honestly. But when we hear the circumstances she lived under, most don't hold her to that standard anymore. They don't call her a hypocrite, although under the strictest definition she was. Suddenly feel what she did was somehow justified. We dislike assurances when they don't suit us, but we can't use the same assurances against an argument when they do suit us. We can't have it both ways. So perhaps that, to me, is the most basic debunk of the hypocrite argument. If everyone determines hypocrisy by personal standards, not only does no one measure up, it also sets that individual on their own. And if you don't go to church because there are hypocrites there, then you're saying that you're not a hypocrite and that you're better than all those people based on your own criteria of morality that may or may not stand up to an actual definition. So that means you are judging everyone else who goes to church because you don't go for that singular reason as being either morally deficient or inferior to you. And to me, that's perhaps the most infuriating part, and part of why people get angry when these conversations come up. Nobody died and left you the moral judge of the universe, and you don't get to say that an entire group of people don't measure up to your standards because you don't know them all. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're measuring them against. You don't know if you'd like them or not, or if you'd agree with them or you don't. You're not going, and so you've judged all those people. Judgment is a thing. We tend to think judgment is something reserved for churchgoers, and especially certain denominations of churchgoers. But much like hypocrisy, judgment is a human characteristic, not a religious one. We don't get judgmental because we go to church or have a religion. Religion interpreted improperly might puff us up more. People might fall back on religion for their pride, but judgment hits the religious and not so religious alike. And if you are saying you don't go because of that, you're judging all those people. And when I encounter that, I don't tolerate it. There are hypocrites in big business, yet we still give them our money. There are hypocrites in restaurants, and we still eat there. There are hypocrites on your job, but you still put up with them on your job. There are hypocrites in Congress. There are hypocrites in the White House. There are hypocrites in government, but you still vote for them and back their campaigns. So admit that you don't see the value in it for yourself. Don't use the hypocrite excuse. It's hypocritical because you're not seeing that you're doing the very thing that you're accusing church people of being. And that proves once again you're no better nor worse than they are. Staying away from one place or system, if you will, on the grounds of hypocrisy presupposes that hypocrisy is only found in that one place. Because if it's not, then your argument isn't substantial right there. You have to account why it's different to go somewhere else with hypocrites fully giving your money and time and effort, but not there. Because by doing this on these grounds, you make yourself one. So what about hypocrisy and believing in God? I would venture that there are very few agnostics and atheists. Statistics for the two combined are somewhere around 7% of the population, which would confirm my argument. I meet a lot of people who claim to be agnostics, but if you talk to them for a few minutes, they're not really agnostic by the absolute definition. Most use the hypocrite argument. They believed at one time, or they were curious about religion, they encountered people, and now that means they aren't sure about any of this stuff because they had an experience with people that they deemed negative or bad or somehow questionable. And instead of figuring out some way to reconcile that or search further, they lost interest or motivation, or in some instances, I'm going to say just lazy and don't really want to be bothered with it anymore. And like I said earlier, the hypocrite argument tends to either shut people up or infuriate people. And so it kind of meets a need for attention. It gets a desired stir out of people one way or another. And outside of this, it's easy to just say you don't want to know more about anything under this argument because you know what? It'll always sound legit to someone because there will always be hypocrites somewhere, so it's a perfect excuse. But saying people are the reason you don't believe in God doesn't make sense. God isn't people, and throughout history, God has done everything both reasonable and unreasonable to make himself known. And yeah, people are a huge ick factor. They're even that for me. But people aren't God. And while sure, people could do a much better job representing who he is, God isn't responsible for the way everyone acts. And maybe, just maybe, the pursuit of community that helps us pursue God and know God for ourselves and feel that shared bond when we are together is worth it. Maybe it's better than the bursts of attention we get for calling an entire religion of people hypocritical. Maybe it's worth discovering this than just staying somewhere mentally and emotionally and spiritually that isn't really honest. At some point in time, we are all accountable for ourselves, and that's the very point I seek to make in this podcast. Blaming the hypocrisy of the rest of the world doesn't get your faith right. It blames everyone else for the lack of it, and at some point in time, that isn't honest anymore. And if this entire argument revolves around honesty, maybe it's important we have a conversation about doubt and faith and things of that nature. Let's dispel myths about doubt and faith. It's perfectly normal to have questions, to wonder about things, to want to learn more about something, to not accept everything that everyone says. That's part of the faith process. It's good for us all to develop thoughts and answers and also accept answers for the things that don't have any answers. That's part of the community that I just spoke of a few minutes ago. It's good for us to be part of something other than us, so that we don't let our entire world of doubts form and shape everything. We may not always have certainty in the way we desire or to our personal satisfaction, but we can find a place of peace. We can learn a whole new way of being. And in this comes in the reality of forgiveness, which I know none of us like to talk about because it makes us uncomfortable, but forgiveness is a humility move. If we forgive, we accept we aren't better than anyone else, because hypocrisy does belong to all of us. And if we are no better and no worse, then spiritual community offers every one of us something. and part of it is for this humanity part. The church is divine in Jesus and human in the people who make up his body. And in that human part, it is as necessary, and that human part is as necessary as the divine part. Well, why? We need to work out our own hypocrisies and our other issues with diligence. We need to be willing to submit ourselves in the sense that we see our own faults as we deal with others and learn how to be more forgiving of them. Forgiveness has this way of becoming a dirty word these days because we tend to focus on the hard part of things and the way that Christians aren't enough. And I agree. We need to have that conversation, but not to the point where we don't accept the part of our faults and failings, and we should never allow others to put us in our place when they themselves have their own issues. We need more of an exchange, and that requires both sides to be more open to honest conversation as opposed to dictating all the terms, which is exactly what's happening now. I believe the church's image could go a long way if leaders and people who get caught doing stuff in larger church and more immediate church could just admit that they haven't always done everything right. We haven't always handled everything right, and there are times when we've been wrong. We are sorry, we ask for forgiveness, and we make the effort to be better than we've been. So I agree the church needs to admit its hypocrisy. And if you don't get that from anyone else in the world, I'm going to admit it here. As a Christian, I haven't always done everything right. I haven't always done right by everyone. Even though I might have thought I was doing the right thing, I haven't always done that. And with God's grace, and as God continues to show me, I am doing better and will continue to do better. And what I'm going to say to that is that point of repentance is something we all need to do, because even if you didn't do anything wrong by the church, you did do wrong to someone. And if your reason for not attending church is hypocrisy, you're judging someone. You're judging a lot of people. So you need to take your deep breath and be willing to learn and listen and accept community where you find it. So we need to learn how to talk to each other. And that's where this starts. That Bible passage we started with in Matthew 7 points something else I think we overlook. Our focus in the story is the judgment. It's the fact that there's a log in our own eye and a speck in our neighbor's eye, and that obviously we have to take care of our issues rather than fix other people's. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's absolutely a true statement. But the neighbor might have had just a speck, but they still had something in their eye. No matter how small it was, they still had some sort of issue, and that's also a fact. And in their line of vision, who knows what it looked like to them? Who knows how that speck damaged their vision or their sense of themselves and their sense of others? Small things can still be just as damaging and just as bad for something as something that's bigger. So the point is everyone has something, whether it seems big or small, it still matters. But that's not our responsibility. Cleaning up the bigger hypocrisy in the church isn't your job, and it's certainly not going to be resolved by you staying home in some sort of abstract protest. Hypocrisy cleanup starts when you focus enough to take care of yourself and the inconsistencies in your life. And I guarantee you that'll keep you busy for the rest of your life. I didn't get this interested in consistent theology and in making sure things line up because I was busy worrying about what everyone else is doing. I remember a few years back meeting someone who wanted to burst into every church in America and call out every single thing he thought they were all doing wrong. And not only is this an entirely obnoxious idea, it's also wrong on a lot of levels, including the expectation that everyone should conform to his decision-making when he has no idea what it's like to be in that position, what it's like to be a leader, what it's like to have to guide and direct and instruct through meetings and finances and different situations. It's easy to be a critic. And I think that we see that a lot in social media today. There are entire accounts where people have millions of views and are merchandising their things that they say because they're critics. They comment on the stupid things people are dumb enough to put up online, and they're making entire things out of that. But I'm not going to lie, it's easy to do that. It's easy to be a critic. There's no creativity involved. You're not really having to think a whole lot about what you do. You just kind of go on there and criticize things, and people get millions of views just doing that. It's easy to have an attitude that things should be better or different than they are. And it seems like that critical attitude dominates our world, our internet, and the way we see things. But when you decide to get serious about your own spiritual life and your own hypocritical measure, your criticism of the whole damn world will flush down the toilet really fast. Because, Angel Face, you're not as innocent as you act. And this anti-hypocrisy protest isn't as noble as it sounds. And I don't deny hurt happens, and things don't always work out like we would like them to, and that people are people, and they often suck as much as we might wish they didn't. But we don't get a pass to check out of life because of it. Esteem yourself properly. Worry about you and how you conduct yourself and how consistent your positions are before you start judging everyone else. There's going to come a time, and I don't know when it will be, but I do believe it will come one day when all of this will be sorted out. And all those people who were fake, Jesus is going to say that he doesn't know them, nor does he know their deeds. So sometime it's all going to make sense and it's all going to line up. And we are cautioned against hypocrisy, against following hypocrites, as well as being the hypocrites. So it's all covered. And if you find one place isn't for you, that's fine. But keep seeking God and keep seeking God's community. And stop using people as an excuse to avoid seeking God. I found that God shows up in some of the most unusual places, in the most unusual ways, and from the most unexpected people. Hypocrisy is not an excuse to avoid it. Because you're not just avoiding others, you're also avoiding yourself. And you're avoiding the work you need to do for your own witness and for your own personal growth. And that, my friends, is my answer to the hypocrisy argument. I thank you for listening to this edition of the podcast today. And if you would like a book that taps into some of the things we've talked about today, I recommend my book, A Heart God Can Use, The Journey to the Center of His Will. That's A Heart God Can Use, The Journey to the Center of His Will. Look me up on Amazon.com, Dr. Leanne B. Marino, and all of my titles will come up. There are over 35 in total. Check them out. There is something for everyone. Go on there and get your copy today. Also, check out my Pathos blog. I am a Pathos columnist at pathos.com/blogs/leadership on fire. That's pathos.com/blogs/leadership on fire. It is a leadership column, but it relates to everything having to do with leadership. So it's for leaders, people who are interested in leadership, or people who just want to learn more about things related to leadership. So definitely check that out, Leadership on Fire today. Also, let's have a conversation across social media. I love to hear from those who are listening to this program, and I've appreciated your feedback, and I hope you've noticed that we have taken suggestions. We have taken the things that you have sent me seriously. So feel free to follow me on social media at Kingdom Power Now. That's at Kingdom Power Now. I am on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and beyond. So check me out at Kingdom Power Now, and let's have that conversation. Let's start that dialogue. If you'd like to learn more about the world of counterculture Christianity, feel free to visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. That's kingdompowernow.org. Also, if you would like to learn more about seminary, that is completely affordable, that can be done from home, and that will not cost an arm and a leg, that will be entirely practical and something that you can use in your everyday ministerial experience, check out Apostolic Covenant Theological Seminary, that's ACTS for short, at acts176.org. That's acts176.org. And if you are in the Charlotte, North Carolina area and you would like to find the community I talked about, because we are here and we are community-based, then check out the work of Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle, more aptly put as Sanctuary, where your found family is waiting, because family means that nobody gets left behind, at welcomeinThisPlace.org. That's welcomeinThisPlace.org. And if you have any questions that are not answered on site, feel free to reach out, and any one of us will be happy to get back to you. And this is Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino reminding you in closing that hypocrisy is a worldwide problem, so don't let it keep you from finding God. Until next time, be blessed. Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Now. I pray it proves to be a blessing in your life. To learn more about this work, ask a question, submit feedback, or a topic suggestion, advertise on air, or donate to this work, visit my website, which contains essential information and links for other points of contact around the web at kingdompowernow.org. Also, if you are in our area and would like to visit Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle SIFT, visit welcomeinThisPlace.org. Until next time, this is Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino reminding you that the kingdom of God is within you, and that means the kingdom is now.